Your feelings want comfort. Your future needs discipline. Every time you choose one, you sacrifice the other. Choose discipline, not feelings. The brutal truth to reclaim your life. If you enjoy the books I publish here, hit like and subscribe. It really motivates me to create more. Also, let me know where you're listening from and the time there in the comments below. It's always cool to see. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The 3 a.m. decision that changes everything. The alarm screams at 3 a.m. Your body feels like concrete. Your mind is fogged, like it's been left outside overnight. Every cell in your body is begging you just 5 more minutes. Stay under the covers. Stay safe. Stay still. This is the moment, right here, where your entire life is quietly asking you a question. Are you going to let your feelings decide, or your future? Most people lose this battle before they even know it's begun. Not because they're weak, but because they never learned how to win. Picture this. A software engineer sits at the edge of their bed, staring at a pair of running shoes. It's dark. The room is silent. 6 months ago, they made a quiet promise to themselves. Get in shape. Take control. Stop being a victim to impulse and inconsistency. But here's the brutal truth no one likes to admit. Feelings don't care about your promises. They don't care about your goals. They don't care about your health, your future, or your responsibilities. Feelings only care about comfort. Right now. This second. So the negotiation begins the same one that happens in households across the world. I'll start tomorrow. I didn't sleep well. It's just one more day. But what if I told you that this one single moment, this quiet, unseen 3 a.m. fork in the road, is the foundation for everything you will succeed at or fail at in your life? It sounds dramatic, but it's true. Here's what most people never learn about discipline. It's not about being motivated. Motivation is emotional. It comes and goes like caffeine, quick to spike, quicker to fade. Discipline is different. Discipline is the decision you make after your excuses have already started talking. The software engineer who gets up and runs at 3 a.m., they're not superhuman. They're not more gifted. They've just learned a secret. They stopped making decisions based on how they felt. They learned to divorce their actions from their emotions. A 2020 study published in Frontiers in Psychology found that people who build routines independent of their mood report greater long-term success and lower stress levels. Their brains aren't fighting themselves every morning because they've trained themselves to act regardless of how they feel. Another study from Stanford University found that people who relied less on willpower and more on environmental structure and habits were significantly more consistent in achieving their goals and far less likely to burn out. In other words, success doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from building systems that ignore how you feel. Now pause for a second. Think about the last time you felt genuinely proud of yourself. Not surface-level happy. Not dopamine from your phone happy. Proud. You pushed through. You didn't give in. You followed through on what you said you'd do. And that satisfaction, that self-respect, it wasn't born from doing something easy. It came from doing something hard, something your feelings told you to avoid. That pride comes from one place: choosing discipline over feelings. Let this audiobook be your starting point, not a hype session, not a grind until 3 a.m. anthem. This is a wake-up call, a tactical rewire, a scientific and emotional blueprint for learning how to stop living at the mercy of your mood. Let's reclaim your attention. Let's rebuild your habits. And most of all, let's make sure your future is no longer decided by your feelings. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most people think discipline is about willpower, about clenching your jaw, digging your heels in, and forcing yourself through discomfort like some kind of human bulldozer. They're wrong. Discipline isn't about force. It's about understanding one of the most important psychological truths most people never learn. Your feelings are not you. Let me say that again because this might be the most important sentence you hear today. Your feelings are not you. They're not commands. They're not facts. They're signals. Temporary bursts of electrical and chemical activity in your brain like weather systems passing overhead. Some bring storms. Some bring sun. But none of them define who you are unless you let them. The person who understands this has unlocked a quiet superpower. They've realized something most people never dare to believe. You can feel tired and still take action. You can feel unmotivated and still move forward. You can feel fear and still be brave. The marketing manager who feels anxious before a presentation, but delivers it anyway. The teacher who's exhausted from a long week, but still creates a lesson that lights up a room. The entrepreneur who's staring down uncertainty and still makes the hard decision that no one else wants to touch. These people, they've trained themselves to operate independently of how they feel. What science tells us is stunning. A 2021 study published in the journal Emotion found that people who acknowledge their emotions without obeying them, a process called emotional decoupling, showed significantly greater self-control and long-term success across nearly every life domain. Their secret? They didn't feel better. They simply acted better, even when their emotions told them not to. Another study from Columbia University revealed that naming your emotions even silently reduces their grip on your behavior by triggering activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational decision-making. Translation: when you can say, "I feel anxious, but I'm not anxiety," you take your power back. But here's the tragic part. Most people get this completely backwards. They believe disciplined, successful people don't feel negative emotions. They imagine the top performers wake up every day feeling inspired, motivated, driven, and laser-focused. And when they don't feel that way themselves, they assume something is wrong with them. So they wait, they stall, they scroll, they sit in silence, hoping motivation returns. This myth keeps them stuck in a loop, one that costs them months, years, sometimes decades. Here's the brutal and liberating truth. Disciplined people feel the exact same things you do. They feel tired. They feel unmotivated. They feel uncertain and afraid. The difference? They've trained themselves to act anyway. They've developed something I call emotional independence. The ability to make decisions based on their values and goals, not their momentary moods. It's not that they don't feel. It's that they don't bow to those feelings. They act in service of something bigger. Their purpose, their standards, their future. This audiobook is about helping you build that same kind of resilience from the inside out. Not by eliminating your emotions, but by putting them in the right place. The passenger seat, not the steering wheel. But there's a problem. Society has been whispering the wrong message in our ears since childhood. Follow your heart. Trust your feelings. Do what feels right. Sounds poetic. But in practice, this advice has quietly created a generation of people who've become slaves to their emotions. People who only take action when they feel like it, which means they rarely take action at all. Here's the mistake that destroys most people's progress. They're waiting to feel different before they act different. Waiting to feel motivated before they start exercising. Waiting to feel confident before they take risks. Waiting to feel ready before they change their life. But feelings don't work that way. You don't wait for them. You create them. Take the software engineer who laces up their shoes at 3 a.m. They don't feel like running, but they run anyway. And somewhere around mile 2, something shifts. The endorphins kick in. Their breathing syncs with their stride. A quiet sense of victory settles in. By the end of the run, they feel incredible. But here's the key. They didn't wait for that feeling to start. They earned it through action. This is the discipline paradox. The actions that feel worst in the moment often lead to the feelings we want most. The workout that feels brutal while you're doing it leaves you feeling unstoppable afterward. The tough conversation you're dreading creates relief, clarity, and connection when it's done. The creative project that feels overwhelming at the start brings deep satisfaction when you complete it. The best feelings in life are not found. They're forged through discomfort, through effort, through courage. But let's zoom out and look at what's really happening beneath the surface. Because every time you choose discipline over emotion, something profound happens. You're not just getting a task done. You're rewiring your brain. You're proving something powerful to yourself. I am the kind of person who does hard things. Psychologists call this self-efficacy, the belief that you can influence the events of your life. And the more often you act from that belief, the stronger it becomes. Think back to a time when you pushed through resistance and accomplished something meaningful. That feeling, that rush of pride, clarity, energy, it wasn't just mental. It was your brain creating new neural pathways, literally reshaping itself to support the next version of you. This is why discipline compounds. Each action builds on the last. Each small win makes the next one easier. Momentum isn't magic, it's built through consistent, uncomfortable choices. But here's why most people never get there. They give up too early. They try discipline for a day, a week, maybe a month. And when the transformation doesn't show up on schedule, they quit. They return to comfort. They tell themselves, maybe I'm just not that kind of person. What they don't realize is that discipline works like compound interest. You won't see dramatic gains at first. In fact, it often feels like nothing's changing. But something is deep beneath the surface. Then one day, the shift is undeniable. The change becomes visible. And suddenly, your life looks completely different. Discipline doesn't give you instant results. It gives you inevitable momentum. If and only if you stay in the game long enough to experience its compounding power. The brutal truth that nobody wants to hear. Your life right now, everything you're experiencing, everything you have and don't have, is the sum total of all the tiny moments where you chose feelings over discipline. Every time you hit snooze instead of rising early. Every time you avoided the discomfort of change. Every time you knew what was right, but chose what was easy. These moments don't feel like much in isolation, but stacked together, they've shaped your relationships, your habits, your health, your mindset, your reality. But here's the beautiful part. Your future life will be the sum of all the moments where you choose differently, where you choose discipline over emotion, responsibility over comfort, long-term growth over short-term relief. Every 3 a.m. alarm you actually answer. Every tough conversation you stop avoiding. Every rep, every book, every focused hour of work. Those are the moments creating your future self right now. Most people don't realize it. We're not just making decisions. We're casting votes. Votes for the kind of person we're becoming. The decision to scroll or to study. The choice to eat clean or indulge. To show up or to skip. To speak truth or stay silent. And here's the secret. You don't need to win every vote. You just need to win most of them. Discipline isn't perfection. It's direction. It's casting more votes for the person you want to become than for the one you're trying to leave behind. It's choosing progress over perfection. Effort over excuses. Growth over comfort. So the next time your alarm goes off, don't just hear it. Remember this moment. That groggy voice telling you to stay in bed, that's not you. That's your past. But the quiet voice nudging you to rise, that's your future self calling, begging you to show up and fight. Because on the other side of that moment, the side where you get up, push through, and do what you said you'd do, is the life you've been dreaming about. And no, it won't feel good to get there. It'll feel hard. It'll feel uncomfortable. It'll feel like work, and that's exactly how you'll know. You're walking the right path. Discipline doesn't feel good at first, but it feels like freedom when you stay with it. So the question isn't, will I feel like doing this? Because you probably won't. The real question is, will I do it anyway? Because that is where everything changes. Chapter 2. The feeling trap that's destroying your potential. January 2nd. The gym is packed, shoulder to shoulder with hope. Machines are taken. People are sweating with purpose. New year, new me, new fire. Now fast forward, February 2nd. Same gym, same city, different energy. It's empty, quiet, abandoned. What happened? Where did all those people go? Did they suddenly become lazy? Did life hit them harder? Number. They fell into the feeling trap. Here's how it goes every year, millions of times. A 38-year-old marketing manager stands in front of their mirror on January 1st, shirt off, gut hanging, ashamed, motivated, ready for change. The emotion is real, the disgust is honest, the resolution is sincere. They join a gym, buy gear, download fitness apps. The first week, they're unstoppable, waking up early, prepping meals, logging workouts, feeling proud. But then, it shifts. The soreness kicks in. The alarms feel heavier. The meals feel bland. The novelty fades. The motivation dips. And suddenly, the internal narrative changes. I'll go tomorrow instead of today. It's just one cheat meal. This weekend doesn't count. I just need a break. But they're not just skipping workouts. They're installing a belief system. They're teaching their brain, feelings determine action. And the moment that belief takes root, it spreads like a virus into every corner of their life. I'll launch the business when I feel ready. I'll fix the marriage when I feel stronger. I'll stop drinking when I feel less stressed. I'll learn the skill when I feel more motivated. It's not laziness, it's not lack of ambition. It's learned hesitation. It's emotional dependence. It's the quiet, seductive lie that you need to feel good before you can do good. Here's what most never understand. The feeling trap doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like self-care, listening to your body, being gentle with yourself, waiting for alignment, choosing ease over strain. But really, it's surrender. It's self-sabotage wearing a therapist's hoodie. It's the slow erosion of your ability to command your future. Let's get brutally honest for a moment. Every area of your life that is underperforming, every place you feel stuck, every goal that's still unrealized, there's a feeling trap running the show. You don't feel brave enough to speak up. You don't feel ready to start that business. You don't feel motivated to save money. You don't feel disciplined enough to commit. But here's the iron truth. You will almost never feel ready for the things that matter most. Read that again. You will never feel brave enough. You will never feel confident enough. You will never feel prepared enough. You will never feel like it's the perfect time. Because it never will be. And yet, the right time is always now. You don't need to feel like it. You just need to act as if you already are. Because action reshapes identity. And identity rewrites emotion. That's how discipline wins. Not by crushing feelings, but by acting in spite of them. Feelings are not preparation for action. In fact, feelings are often the enemy of action. Let me show you what that really means. There was a software engineer in their late 30s, juggling a full-time job, a mortgage, and 2 kids. Every morning for 6 months, they set their alarm an hour early. Not because they felt inspired, but because they had a dream. To finish a side project that could one day replace their job. But here's the truth. They never once felt like doing it. The code was exhausting. Progress was painfully slow. Most mornings, their bodies screamed for more sleep. But they had learned something that most people never do, something that changed the trajectory of their life. Feelings lie. They don't mean to, but they lie, often and convincingly. Feelings say you're too tired when you're just comfortable. Feelings say you're not ready when you're just afraid. Feelings say you don't have time when you're really avoiding discomfort. Feelings say it's not worth it when it's simply not easy. So this engineer made a rule. 1 hour. Every morning. No exceptions. Not when they felt motivated. Not when they felt inspired. Not when life was convenient. Every single day. Now let's pause here because psychology backs this up. According to Dr. Robert Sapolsky at Stanford, when we act based on values instead of feelings, we activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term planning, discipline, and delayed gratification. When we act based on emotion, we default to the amygdala, the survival center that seeks pleasure and avoids pain. One reinforces leadership, the other reinforces avoidance. Back to the engineer. Some mornings were terrible, the code was ugly, and progress felt invisible. But they did it anyway. And after 6 months, they built something remarkable. Not because they felt like it, but because they acted anyway. They escaped the trap that keeps millions stuck in a loop of waiting for the right mood. But here's where it gets deeper. This trap isn't just about procrastination. It's about identity. Every time you choose feelings over action, you're casting a vote for a specific version of yourself, the version who only acts when life is easy. You're telling your brain, I need to feel good before I do good. And the brain listens. Neuroscience calls this Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together, wire together. The more you obey your feelings, the more your brain builds a neural identity around that behavior. But there's a way out, and it starts with this shift. I act based on values, not moods. Every time you move forward, despite doubt, fatigue, or fear, you're reinforcing a new identity. You're wiring your brain for resilience. You're programming yourself to act from vision, not emotion. And that's how discipline is formed. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is freedom. Freedom from emotional dependence. Freedom from procrastination. Freedom from a life dictated by moods and impulses. If you're tired of feeling stuck, don't wait to feel different. Start acting different. What you do when you don't feel like it becomes who you are. That's not just a motivational quote. That's neuroplasticity in action. When a teacher designs an engaging lesson after 4 hours of sleep, they're not just serving their students, they're shaping their own identity. They're telling their brain, I am someone who creates value, even when I'm tired. When a business owner makes that uncomfortable sales call while anxiety claws at their chest, they're not just pushing through fear, they're rewiring their response to fear itself. Every action becomes a vote for the future self they're becoming. When a parent kneels down and speaks calmly to their child, even when their patience is gone, that's not just good parenting. That's identity-level change in real time. Now here's the secret most never hear. Surface-level change relies on emotion. Identity-level change relies on repetition. Anyone can act differently when they feel different. But the people who transform their lives? They act based on who they want to become, not how they feel in the moment. That's what makes the change last. And this is where most people lose the game without realizing it. They wait for motivation. They chase the mood. They try to ride the energy wave that disappears by week 2. But the highest performers? They don't play that game. They build systems that function when their feelings don't. Psychologists call this environmental scaffolding, setting up your surroundings and routines in a way that carries you through when motivation collapses. Let's make it real. The woman who works out every morning, she doesn't trust herself to feel motivated. She lays out her shoes the night before. Her alarm is across the room. Her calendar has the workout blocked like a business meeting. She's not relying on willpower. She's using design. The man who eats clean during long workdays? He doesn't debate with cravings at 5 p.m. He meal preps on Sunday. His fridge is clean. His snacks are packed. His decisions were made before the moment of weakness arrived. These aren't disciplined people. They're just people who stopped expecting their emotions to carry the weight of their dreams. Feelings are feedback, not instructions. That's the mindset shift. Your systems should carry you regardless of how inspired, tired, or excited you feel that day. That's the difference between a life built on hope and a life built on structure. One collapses under pressure. The other compounds with time. Let's say you want to build a business. Not just talk about it. Build it. You can't rely on inspiration to show up every morning wearing a cape. Because, spoiler, it won't. The real ones, the ones who actually make it do something far less glamorous, but far more powerful. They carve out focused hours, even when the world's on fire. They set deadlines like it's life or death. They join communities that don't let them vanish when it gets hard. They build systems that move their dreams forward even when their emotions drag behind. That's the external structure. But here's what most people miss. The most powerful systems aren't the ones on your calendar. They're the ones in your mind. You can build funnels, habits, and Google Sheets. But if you haven't trained your brain to act without permission from your feelings, you'll still quit every time it gets messy. What you need isn't more dopamine. You need emotional immunity. What is emotional immunity? It's not about shutting off emotions. It's about separating feelings from function. You feel exhausted, but you still write the proposal. You feel anxious, but you still make the call. You feel unmotivated, but you still show up. You feel unsure, but you still take the next step. You feel everything, and still do what needs to be done. This is real freedom when your emotions no longer dictate your outcomes. Now here's the brutal truth that most self-help books skip. Your feelings will rarely match your goals. There will always be a gap between what you want to do and what you feel like doing. Most people treat that gap like a malfunction. They say, maybe I just need to get more motivated. I should listen to another podcast. Maybe if I feel more inspired, I'll finally take action. You won't. Because that gap isn't a flaw in the system, it is the system. The gap is where greatness gets built. The gap is where transformation happens. The gap is the workout for your mind. It's where you prove, I do hard things even when they feel wrong. That's not just discipline, it's distress, tolerance. A psychological superpower that predicts higher income, better mental health, deeper relationships, more consistent progress. Because let's be honest, life doesn't care about your feelings. Setbacks, rejections, delays, burnout, they're not interruptions. They're standard operating procedure. If you can only function when you feel great, you'll function about 12 days a year. But if you build the muscle of emotional immunity, you become unstoppable. You don't need the stars to align. You don't need to feel ready. You just need the system to run even in the rain. Let your feelings exist, but stop letting them decide. That's the beginning of true power. But here's the truth the successful already know. The person who's mastered the art of acting regardless of how they feel, they hold the keys to their full potential all day, every day. They don't lose hours to bad moods. They don't lose weeks to, I'll start tomorrow. They don't lose months stuck in fear or uncertainty. They keep moving. Building momentum so powerful it compounds quietly behind the scenes, turning small daily victories into extraordinary, unstoppable results. So next time you hear yourself say, I don't feel like it, pause. Remember this moment. Feelings are data, not commands. Your life, the one you want, is waiting right on the other side of that feeling. Every time you choose action over emotion, you're voting for a different future. You're becoming the person who creates their life, not the person who accepts whatever life hands them. The feeling trap? It's real, but it's not permanent. You can break free, but only if you're willing to do what feels wrong in the moment, to create what's right in the long run. Only if you decide to act your way into feeling different, instead of waiting to feel different before you act. The choice is yours, but choose fast, because every second you wait to feel ready is a second you could spend becoming ready. That's the real power and the real freedom. Chapter 3. The Comfort Prison. Most people never escape. Imagine this. Your apartment is a perfect bubble of comfort. The thermostat is dialed in just right. The fridge stocked with your favorite foods. The couch angled perfectly to watch that massive 65-inch TV. Wi-Fi blazing fast. Streaming services ready to binge. And your phone? Always within arm's reach. Welcome to modern comfort. But here's the brutal truth: this comfort, it's quietly killing your potential. Picture a data analyst sinking into this setup every night after work. They think they've created the ultimate sanctuary for relaxation. But what they don't realize is, they've built a prison. A cozy, convenient, perfectly crafted prison. That keeps them locked in mediocrity. No steel bars, no physical chains. The bars? They're made of convenience. The locks, psychological. And the worst part? The prisoner holds the key but doesn't even know they're trapped. This is the comfort prison, and most people spend their whole lives inside it, never recognizing the cost of their captivity. Before you brush this off as drama, ask yourself, when was the last time you really scared yourself? When did you last put yourself in a position where failure was real? Where you might look foolish? Where you stretched past your limits? If you're like most, you can't remember. Not because you're lazy or weak, because modern life has trained you to avoid discomfort like a reflex. We live in the most comfortable time in human history. Instant entertainment. Food delivered at the tap of a finger. Climate-controlled homes. Endless distractions that keep you from sitting with hard thoughts or uncomfortable feelings. This comfort isn't evil, but it's created a hidden epidemic. We've lost our tolerance for discomfort. We're allergic to challenge. We've forgotten that growth demands discomfort. Think about your typical evening. You come home exhausted from the day's battles. Your brain screams for relief, restoration, ease. So what do? You order takeout instead of cooking. You scroll endlessly on social media instead of reading. You binge Netflix instead of learning something new. You choose the path of least resistance. In every tiny decision, each choice feels reasonable. Each feels justified. Each feels like self-care. But together, they build walls around your potential. Walls that grow taller and thicker every single day. Here's the insidious truth nobody talks about. Comfort addiction is real, and it works exactly like any other addiction. The more comfort you consume, the more you need to feel satisfied. What once was a simple pleasure becomes a necessity. What once was an occasional indulgence turns into a daily requirement. What once was relaxing becomes a desperate escape. The data analyst? They don't just watch one episode anymore. They binge entire seasons, losing hours to stories that add nothing to their life. They don't just order takeout occasionally. They've forgotten how to cook, how to plan meals, how to intentionally nourish their body. They don't just scroll on social media for a few minutes. They scroll mindlessly for hours, comparing their messy, complicated real life to everyone else's highlight reel. And here's the kicker. With every comfort-seeking choice, their ability to handle discomfort shrinks. Their boredom threshold lowers. Their patience for delayed rewards weakens. Their tolerance for uncertainty vanishes. They're not just avoiding growth. They're actively training themselves to be incapable of growth. This is the hidden enemy in your life. Comfort isn't neutral. It's not just the absence of challenge. Comfort is a saboteur, quietly working against your progress. Every moment you spend inside your comfort zone, your skills atrophy. Your mental muscles weaken. Your resilience fades. Your capacity to handle difficulty shrinks. But it's so gradual, so subtle. It's like sitting in a pot of water that's slowly heating up. The temperature rises inch by inch. You don't notice the burn until you're cooked alive and it's too late. That data analyst? They don't realize that their nightly routine is programming their brain for weakness. Every easy choice they make is wiring their neurons to prefer comfort. They're teaching their brain to avoid challenge, to chase pleasure, to choose short-term comfort over long-term growth. That's the comfort prison in action. But here's what makes this comfort prison even more dangerous. It doesn't just sneak into your evenings or weekends. It seeps into every corner of your life. At work, you dodge tough projects because they feel too hard. In your relationships, you avoid difficult conversations because they feel too uncomfortable. In your health, you skip workouts because they feel too demanding. In your finances, you ignore budgeting because it feels too restrictive. You start organizing your entire life around avoiding discomfort. And guess what? You're organizing your entire life around avoiding growth. You become the person who chooses familiar over beneficial, easy over effective, comfort over transformation. Think about the last time you had a brilliant idea, a spark of inspiration, a moment of crystal clear clarity about what you wanted to change or achieve. What happened to that idea? If you're honest, it probably died in the comfort prison. It got smothered by that voice whispering, "That sounds hard. Maybe later, when I feel more ready." I don't have time for that right now. The comfort prison doesn't just stop you from acting. It kills your ideas before they even have a chance to grow. It trains you to self-censor your dreams, to lower your expectations, to settle for less than what you're truly capable of. And here's a critical insight. Your brain is an incredibly efficient learning machine. It gives you exactly what you train it to give you. Train it to seek comfort, and it becomes a comfort-seeking machine. Train it to avoid difficulty, and it becomes a difficulty-avoiding machine. Train it to chase pleasure over progress, and it becomes a pleasure-prioritizing machine. This is why breaking free is so hard. It's not just about changing habits. It's about rewiring neural pathways strengthened thousands of times. It's fighting against brain programming designed to keep you safe, comfortable, and unchanged. But here's the brutal truth no one wants to admit. Safety is an illusion. The world is moving faster than ever, and the skills that got you here won't get you where you need to go. The person who prioritizes comfort today is setting themselves up for discomfort tomorrow. The person who avoids challenge today is ensuring they'll be unprepared for the challenges ahead. The comfort prison is real, and it's everywhere. But the next chapter, we're going to learn exactly how to break out. Think back to the last major disruption in your industry, your relationship, or your life. Were you ready? Did your comfort habits actually serve you when everything changed? Or did you suddenly realize you'd grown soft, unprepared, dependent on everything staying exactly the same? The marketing manager who avoided difficult conversations for years? They weren't ready when conflict became unavoidable. The teacher who relied on the same lesson plans year after year? They weren't ready when technology demanded a reinvention. The entrepreneur who skipped financial planning because it felt tedious? They weren't ready when the economy shifted beneath their feet. Here's the brutal truth about the comfort prison. It doesn't just leave you unprepared for the outside world. It makes you a stranger to yourself. When you spend years avoiding discomfort, you forget your own power. You forget what you can achieve when you push through resistance. You forget the deep satisfaction that comes from overcoming tough challenges. You forget the pride that only doing hard things can give you. You start to believe the story that comfort whispers about you. That you're not the kind of person who can handle difficulty. That you don't have what it takes to succeed. That you should settle, be grateful for what you have, and never ask for more. And here's the worst part. That story becomes your identity. And once your identity locks in, it becomes your reality. That data analyst on the couch, they don't just have a comfort problem. They have an identity problem. They see themselves as someone who needs comfort to survive. Someone who deserves ease after a hard day. Someone who isn't built for challenge or growth. That identity shapes every decision they make, every opportunity they ignore, every dream they let die quietly. But what if I told you that identity is a lie? The person you think you are right now, that's just the person you trained yourself to be. Through years of comfort-seeking choices. What if your real potential, your true capabilities, the authentic you, is buried beneath those layers of comfort conditioning? Comfort doesn't prepare you for change. Comfort makes you fragile, and in a world moving faster than ever, fragility is the deadliest weakness you can carry. But here's the good news. There's another way to live. There's a way to use discomfort as a powerful tool for growth. To see it not as the enemy, but as a guide. To build what's called anti-fragility. The ability to get stronger because of stress, not weaker. Think of the software engineer who tackles projects that stretch their skills. The parent who faces tough talks with their kids instead of hiding. The business owner who regularly puts themselves in uncomfortable situations to grow their network and power. These people aren't just preparing for the future. They're creating the future they want. Here's the key insight that changes everything. Discomfort isn't your enemy. Discomfort is information. It's your brain's way of telling you. You're standing at the edge of your current limits. It's the signal that growth is waiting, if you're willing to step through the fear and push forward. But here's the catch most people miss. They interpret discomfort as a stop sign. They feel that uneasy tug, and their instinct is to run back to what's familiar, safe, and comfortable. They don't realize that discomfort is actually a green light. It's permission, an invitation to grow, a signal saying, you're on the edge, lean in or stay stuck. Think about the person learning a new language. They stumble over words, can't quite express what they mean, and that feels awful. But what if instead of seeing that as failure, they saw it as feedback? That discomfort is exactly where growth lives, showing them precisely where to focus next. Or the entrepreneur stepping into the chaos of uncertainty and risk. That queasy feeling? It's not a stop sign. It's training mental toughness in the making. Every uncomfortable moment is a rep in the gym of resilience. The person pushing their body in the gym, muscles burning, lungs screaming for air. That pain? It's not punishment. It's the price of transformation. Every twinge, every ache is the sound of progress being made. But here's where the story twists. Most people think successful people have somehow escaped discomfort. They imagine disciplined, driven individuals don't feel the pull of comfort, the allure of the easy way out. That's a dangerous myth, a myth that keeps you locked in your comfort prison. The truth? Successful people feel the same discomfort you do. They want the easy way too. They get tempted to quit, to avoid the hard stuff, to choose pleasure over progress. The difference is that they have learned to use discomfort as a compass, not a cage. When discomfort shows up, they don't run. They pause and ask themselves a crucial question. Is this discomfort pointing me toward growth or away from it? If it points to growth, they lean in. They step closer to the edge, knowing that's where transformation happens. If it points away, they address it because not all discomfort is productive. This is the secret to mastering discomfort. Productive discomfort versus destructive discomfort. Productive discomfort is the fire that fuels progress. Challenging yourself, stretching your limits, pursuing what matters deeply. Destructive discomfort is the slow poison. Neglecting health, avoiding responsibilities, staying stuck in toxic patterns that drain you. The comfort prison tricks you by blurring the lines. It tells you all discomfort is bad. It whispers that you deserve to feel good all the time. that you should always pick the easiest path. But this philosophy only leads to destructive discomfort. The deep, gnawing pain of knowing you're not living up to your potential. And that's the real trap. The person who avoids the productive discomfort of exercise ends up trapped in the destructive discomfort of poor health. The one who sidesteps the productive discomfort of hard conversations gets stuck with the destructive discomfort of broken relationships. The person who shies away from learning new skills feels the crushing weight of destructive discomfort, career stagnation, missed opportunities, fading relevance. Discomfort is coming that's non-negotiable. The real question is, which kind will you choose? The discomfort that builds you up, or the discomfort that breaks you down? Here's the advanced strategy, the game changer that separates those who break free from the comfort prison from those who stay stuck. Successful people don't wait for discomfort to crash into them like a wave. They hunt it down. They seek it out like a treasure, knowing it holds the key to growth. They take on projects that make their stomach twist. They have conversations their heart screams to avoid. They dive into skills that feel overwhelming and confusing at first. They put themselves in situations where failure is possible, judgment is likely, and looking foolish is almost guaranteed. But they don't do this because they enjoy pain. They do it because they understand a fundamental truth. Discomfort is the price of growth. Now, here's the secret most people miss. You don't have to make radical life changes to escape the comfort prison. No need to quit your job, move to another country, or reinvent yourself overnight. It's about the small choices. The tiny moments where you decide growth beats comfort. The financial advisor who makes one difficult call a day instead of dodging tough client conversations. The parent who sits down for one honest talk with their teenager instead of pretending everything's fine. The office worker who speaks up once in a meeting instead of shrinking into silence. The student who asks one question in class instead of faking understanding. These small acts might look insignificant, but they're revolutionary. Every time you pick discomfort over comfort, you're telling yourself a new story. You're proving you're capable of more than you believed. You're building momentum, brick by brick, choice by choice. And here's what happens when you keep choosing this way. Your comfort zone doesn't just shift, it expands. What once felt impossible becomes just challenging. What once triggered anxiety now sparks excitement. What once overwhelmed now feels like an adventure waiting to be conquered. But the most profound change happens inside you. You begin to see yourself in a new light, not as someone who avoids challenges, but as someone who welcomes them. Someone who grows through difficulty instead of shrinking from it. Someone who creates opportunities instead of waiting for them to fall from the sky. Psychologists call this a mastery orientation, the deep belief that your abilities aren't fixed, but expand with effort and persistence. It's not just a mindset shift, it's a transformation of your identity. Take the graphic designer who broke free from their comfort prison, step by step. For years, they played it safe, same clients, same styles, same easy projects. Comfortable, but stagnant. Their passion was fading, their income flatlining, their growth frozen. Then, one choice changed everything. They committed to trying one new uncomfortable thing each week. The first week, experimenting with a bold style they'd admired but never dared try. It was awkward. Their designs stumbled. But they kept pushing. Week 2, reaching out to a client in a totally new industry. The conversation was tense. The project slipped away. But with it came priceless lessons on communication and courage. Week 3, enrolling in a challenging course that shattered old assumptions and forced them to relearn fundamentals. It was frustrating, humbling, but it opened a fresh perspective. Week after week, choice after choice, they rewired their identity. No longer safe or comfortable, but creative, adaptable, unstoppable. 6 months later, a transformed portfolio, a thriving client list, a doubled income, but most important of all, reignited passion and purpose. That's the power of small, consistent discomfort. Not a grand leap, but relentless, courageous steps forward. The pathway out of the comfort prison, paved with challenges embraced, lessons learned, and identity rebuilt. And it's waiting for you. But the most powerful change is internal. When you start choosing productive discomfort over destructive comfort, everything inside you begins to shift. You don't just act differently, you see yourself differently. You become someone who grows, who leans into challenges instead of shrinking away. someone who shapes their reality instead of passively accepting whatever life throws their way. This change goes deeper than habit. It rewires your identity. Once you recognize yourself as a person who thrives through struggle, seeking discomfort stops feeling like a chore. It becomes a part of your essence, something you want to do, not something you have to force. Picture the data analyst sinking into their cushy couch, surrounded by comfort. They face a choice. Keep building invisible walls around their potential with every easy choice, or start tearing those walls down, brick by brick, with every brave, uncomfortable decision. Remain trapped in the prison of convenience, or become the architect of their own limitless future. This isn't about extreme sacrifice or constant suffering. It's about conscious choices, choosing discomfort when it leads to growth, and saving comfort as a reward, not a crutch. The comfort prison is real, but here's the truth you need to hear. The door is unlocked. You've always held the key. Now it's up to you. Because beyond that door, beyond the safety of your comfort zone, lies the life you've been dreaming of. You can't build it from your couch. You can't create it by choosing convenience over challenge. You can only get there by walking through the discomfort most people run from their entire lives. Every uncomfortable step you take is a step toward becoming the person you were meant to be. The door is wide open. The question is simple. Will you walk through it? Chapter 4. Why your brain sabotages success and how to stop it. The presentation is tomorrow. The promotion hinges on it. 6 months of blood, sweat, and relentless preparation have built up to this exact moment. But here they are, 2 a.m., and instead of peaceful sleep, a project manager lies wide awake, trapped in a loop of racing thoughts. Their mind spins every possible way it could all unravel. The very brain that should be their greatest ally feels like a saboteur, whispering doubt and fear louder than hope. This is self-sabotage, unfolding in real time. And it's happening inside someone desperate to succeed. But here's the maddening truth. This isn't new. 3 months ago, the same scenario played out. Anxiety froze them before a key presentation. 6 months before that, they bailed on a networking event, convinced they weren't ready. A year ago, they talked themselves out of applying for their dream job because their brain churned out 1,000 reasons why they weren't good enough. This isn't coincidence. It's not bad luck. And it's not a personal failing. It's their brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. Keep them safe. Here's the problem. Your brain's ancient survival wiring is not wired for success. It wasn't built for modern challenges like standing out, taking risks, or stepping boldly into the unknown. Its number one job? Survival. Back in the day, survival meant being safe, invisible, and unchanged. Your brain equates safe with staying exactly where you are. Standing out? That's dangerous. Taking risks? Even worse. Changing your identity? Life-threatening. Imagine your ancestors 50,000 years ago. The one who took reckless risks? Eaten by predators? The one who stood out? Cast out alone in the wilderness? The one who challenged the tribe's ways? The cause of conflict that could destroy the whole group? Anxiety, fear, self-doubt, all these were life-saving responses, not flaws. But here's the twist. You're not living in the Stone Age. Today, the biggest danger is not taking risks. Standing out often is the path to success. Growth demands change. Challenging the status quo sparks innovation. The real threat isn't physical death. It's the slow, silent death of your potential. Think about what success really demands. Putting yourself out there, vulnerable and exposed, risking failure, rejection, harsh criticism. Shedding old identities and stepping into the unknown. Challenging comfortable norms, even upsetting those who prefer you to stay small. To your brain, these actions look like threats to survival. So it fights back. It floods you with anxiety before the big leap. It sows self-doubt just as opportunity knocks. It plants fear right before transformation. It whispers, "You're not ready, not qualified, not worthy." That project manager lying awake at 2 a.m., they're not broken. They're caught in a battle with their brain's survival system, a system programmed to keep them small, safe, and stuck. But the brain's sabotage isn't just triggered at the brink of success. It starts the moment you think about growth, when you dream of change, when you consider improvement. Resistance is waiting there, ready to block you before you even take the first step. This is the invisible war inside your mind, the one that determines whether you stay trapped in fear or break free and claim the success waiting for you on the other side. What you're feeling isn't failure, it's friction. And friction is the first sign that you're forging something new. See, your brain isn't trying to sabotage you because it's cruel. It's trying to protect you. It's doing exactly what it was wired to do: conserve energy, minimize risk, avoid pain. But what it doesn't understand until you teach it is that discomfort isn't always dangerous. Sometimes, discomfort is the doorway to everything you've ever wanted. That's why every time you lean into fear, you're not just acting bravely, you're building neural resilience. You're interrupting decades-old mental loops and replacing them with stronger, more empowering scripts. It's not easy, but it's not supposed to be. Because you're not just breaking habits, you're breaking identities. You're rewriting a personal narrative that's been running in the background for years, sometimes decades. I'm not good at that. That's just not who I am. I've always been this way. I need certainty before I move. Those are not facts. Those are echoes of a past version of you that never got the chance to evolve. But now, you're giving yourself that chance. And with every uncomfortable action, the presentation, the pitch, the confrontation, the first step, you're casting a vote for a new identity. An identity rooted in capability, not comfort. In expansion, not avoidance. In who you can become, not who you've been. And here's what mature, growth-oriented people like you need to remember. You don't need to erase the old pathways overnight. You just need to stop reinforcing them. Let them fade with disuse, while you strengthen new ones with action. That's how real change happens. Not through sudden reinvention, but through intentional repetition. Every time you choose courage over convenience, you're laying fresh tracks in your brain, and eventually, those tracks become the new road your life drives on. So yes, it's hard, but it's working. And on the other side of that resistance is freedom. Think of it like updating software on your computer. During the update process, things might run slowly or glitch temporarily. This doesn't mean the update is failing. It means the system is reorganizing itself to operate more effectively. Your brain works the same way. During the reprogramming process, you might experience increased anxiety, doubt, or resistance. This is normal and temporary. But there's a specific way to accelerate this reprogramming process. Instead of just taking action despite your brain's resistance, you can actively communicate with your brain during the process. You can acknowledge the fear while explaining why the action is beneficial. When the project manager feels anxiety about their presentation, instead of fighting the feeling or trying to ignore it, they can have a conversation with their brain. I know you're trying to protect me by making me feel anxious about this presentation. You're worried that I might fail or be judged. But this presentation is actually an opportunity for growth and advancement. The risk is worth taking because the potential benefits outweigh the potential costs. This might sound strange, but research in cognitive behavioral therapy shows that this kind of internal dialogue can significantly reduce anxiety and increase performance. You're not dismissing your brain's concerns. You're acknowledging them while providing better information for decision-making. But here's the advanced technique that most people never learn. You can actually negotiate with your brain's protective mechanisms. Instead of seeing them as obstacles to overcome, you can treat them as advisors to consult. Let me show you how this works. When a software developer feels resistance about learning a new programming language, instead of forcing themselves to push through the discomfort, they can have a more sophisticated conversation with their brain. I notice you're creating resistance about learning this new language. What are you trying to protect me from? Are you worried that I'll fail and feel stupid? Are you concerned that I'll waste time on something that won't be useful? Are you afraid that I'll discover I'm not as smart as I think I am? By asking these questions, they're not fighting their brain's protective mechanisms. They're gathering intelligence about what specific fears or concerns are driving the resistance. And once they understand the specific concern, they can address it directly. If the brain is worried about failure, they can create a learning plan that makes failure less likely. If the brain is concerned about wasted time, they can research the practical applications of the new language. If the brain is afraid of discovering limitations, They can reframe the learning process as exploration rather than evaluation. This approach transforms your relationship with your brain from adversarial to collaborative. Instead of fighting against your protective mechanisms, you're working with them to find solutions that satisfy both your growth goals and your brain's safety concerns. Here's another powerful technique: visualization with emotional rehearsal. Instead of just imagining success, you imagine the entire process, including the uncomfortable emotions you'll experience along the way. You visualize feeling nervous before the presentation and handling that nervousness effectively. You imagine potential challenges and see yourself navigating them successfully. This prepares your brain for the reality of the experience, rather than creating unrealistic expectations. Your brain learns that you can feel uncomfortable and still perform well. It starts to associate challenging situations with successful outcomes, rather than just focusing on potential threats. But the most powerful reprogramming technique is what I call identity bridging. Instead of trying to change your behavior directly, you focus on changing your identity. You start seeing yourself as the kind of person who takes risks, embraces challenges, and pursues growth. You act from this new identity rather than trying to force new behaviors onto your old identity. The project manager doesn't just prepare for their presentation. They start identifying as someone who excels at presentations. They study successful presenters. They practice presentation skills regularly. They seek out opportunities to speak publicly. They gradually build evidence that supports their new identity as a confident, capable presenter. This is identity-level change, and it's the most sustainable form of transformation because it aligns your actions with your self-concept. When your identity changes, your behaviors change naturally to match. Your brain stops resisting because the new behaviors are consistent with who you believe yourself to be. But here's what most people miss about identity change. It doesn't happen through affirmations or positive thinking alone. It happens through evidence. You have to prove to yourself, through your actions, that you are who you claim to be. Every time you act consistent with your desired identity, you're creating evidence that supports that identity. Every time you act inconsistent with your desired identity, you're creating evidence that contradicts it. The teacher who wants to identify as someone who embraces technology doesn't just tell themselves they're tech-savvy. They take online courses. They experiment with new educational apps. They ask younger colleagues for help with digital tools. They consistently act like someone who is comfortable with technology until their brain accepts this as their new identity. The entrepreneur who wants to identify as someone who is comfortable with sales doesn't just visualize themselves as a great salesperson. They make sales calls. They study sales techniques. They practice handling objections. They consistently act like someone who sees sales as a valuable service until their brain rewires to support this identity. This is how you stop your brain from sabotaging your success. You don't fight against your brain's protective mechanisms. You reprogram them. You teach your brain that success is safe, that growth is beneficial, that change is positive. You do this through consistent action, internal dialogue, visualization, and identity work. But here's the brutal truth. This process requires you to feel uncomfortable while your brain adjusts. You have to be willing to experience anxiety while teaching your brain that the situation is actually safe. You have to be willing to feel doubt while proving to yourself that you are capable. You have to be willing to feel resistance while demonstrating that change is beneficial. No. Most people aren't willing to feel uncomfortable long enough for the reprogramming to take hold. They want the benefits of change without the discomfort of changing. But discomfort is not a side effect of reprogramming your brain. Discomfort is the mechanism through which reprogramming happens. The project manager at 2 a.m. has a choice. They can lie there letting their brain run its familiar patterns of worry and self-doubt. Or they can recognize what's happening and actively work to reprogram those patterns. They can acknowledge their brain's concerns while providing better information. They can visualize successful outcomes while preparing for challenges. They can act from the identity of someone who handles pressure well, rather than someone who is overwhelmed by it. The choice is always yours. Your brain will continue operating on its current programming until you actively work to change it. But once you understand how to reprogram your mental operating system, you have access to a power that most people never discover. The power to make your brain work for your success instead of against it. Your brain is the most sophisticated computer ever created. But like any computer, it operates according to its programming. The question is, who's writing the code? Chapter 5. The identity shift that changes everything. The mirror doesn't lie. A sales manager stares at their reflection every morning, seeing the same person they've always been. Average performer, decent results, nothing spectacular. They brush their teeth, get dressed, and head to work, carrying this identity with them like invisible baggage that weighs down every interaction, every opportunity, every possibility for growth. But what if I told you that the person in that mirror isn't who you really are? What if that identity you carry is nothing more than a story you've been telling yourself, and you have the power to write a completely different story starting today? This is the most important chapter you'll ever read about change, because it's not about changing what you do. It's about changing who you are. And when you change who you are, everything else changes automatically. Here's what most people get backwards about transformation. They try to change their behaviors while keeping the same identity. They want to start exercising while still seeing themselves as someone who hates working out. They want to build a business while still identifying as someone who's not entrepreneurial. They want to improve their relationships while still believing they're not good with people. This approach is like trying to drive forward while keeping the parking brake engaged. You might make some progress, but it will be slow, difficult, and unsustainable. Eventually, you'll revert back to behaviors that match your identity, because psychological consistency is one of the strongest forces in human nature. Your brain has a built-in system that works constantly to keep your actions aligned with your identity. If you see yourself as someone who's not athletic, your brain will generate thoughts and feelings that discourage athletic behavior. If you identify as someone who's not creative, your brain will create resistance around creative activities. If you believe you're someone who's not good with money, your brain will sabotage your financial decisions to maintain consistency with that identity. This is why willpower fails. This is why motivation fades. This is why most people can't sustain positive changes. They're fighting against their own identity, and identity always wins in the long run. But here's the beautiful truth that changes everything. Identity is not fixed. It's not determined by your past, your genetics, your upbringing, or your circumstances. Identity is a choice. It's a story you tell yourself about who you are, and you have the power to edit that story at any time. The sales manager looking in the mirror has been telling themselves a story about being average. But what if they started telling themselves a different story? What if they started identifying as someone who excels at sales, someone who creates value for their clients, someone who consistently exceeds their targets? But that's not realistic, you might be thinking. You can't just pretend to be someone you're not. And you're right. You can't pretend, but you can become. There's a crucial difference between pretending to have an identity and actively building that identity through your actions. Here's how identity actually works. It's not based on who you've been. It's based on evidence of who you're becoming. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to be. Every choice is either reinforcing your current identity or building a new one. When the sales manager makes one extra call per day, they're voting for the identity of someone who goes above and beyond. When they spend 30 minutes learning new sales techniques, they're voting for the identity of someone who invests in their professional development. When they follow up with clients more consistently, they're voting for the identity of someone who provides exceptional service. Each individual action might seem insignificant, but collectively, these actions are building evidence for a new identity. And when you have enough evidence, your brain starts accepting the new identity as true. This is when transformation becomes effortless, because you're no longer fighting against your identity. You're acting in alignment with it. Think about someone you know who's made a dramatic positive change in their life. Maybe they lost a significant amount of weight, built a successful business, or transformed their relationships. If you look closely, you'll notice that at some point, their identity shifted. They stopped seeing themselves as someone who struggles with weight and started seeing themselves as someone who takes care of their health. They stopped seeing themselves as an employee and started seeing themselves as an entrepreneur. They stopped seeing themselves as someone who has relationship problems and started seeing themselves as someone who creates healthy connections. This identity shift didn't happen overnight, but it happened faster than you might think. Because once they started acting from their new identity, the actions that used to feel difficult became natural. The behaviors that used to require willpower became automatic. The changes that used to feel forced became effortless. But here's where most people get stuck. They wait for the identity to change before they start acting differently. They think they need to feel like a successful person before they can act like a successful person. They believe they need to see themselves as disciplined before they can act with discipline. They assume they need to identify as confident before they can behave confidently. This is backwards. Identity follows action, not the other way around. You don't act like the person you are. You become the person you act like. The teacher who wants to identify as someone who's great with technology doesn't wait until they feel tech-savvy to start learning new tools. They start learning new tools, and gradually, their identity shifts to match their actions. The entrepreneur who wants to identify as someone who's comfortable with risk doesn't wait until they feel brave to start taking calculated risks. They start taking calculated risks, and their identity evolves to support this behavior. This is the identity shift that changes everything, and it starts with a simple but powerful question. What would someone who has already achieved my goals do in this situation? When the sales manager faces a difficult client, instead of acting from their current identity of being average, they ask themselves, what would a top performer do in this situation? When they're deciding whether to make one more call at the end of the day, they ask, what would someone who consistently exceeds their targets do? When they're choosing between going home early or investing time in skill development, they ask, what would someone who takes their career seriously do? This question bypasses the limitations of your current identity and gives you access to behaviors that match your desired identity. And every time you act from your desired identity, you're building evidence that supports that identity, becoming real. But there's a more advanced technique that accelerates this process dramatically. Instead of just asking what your future self would do, you start making decisions as if you already are that person. You don't act like someone who wants to be successful. You act like someone who is successful. You don't behave like someone who's trying to get in shape. You behave like someone who is in shape. You don't operate like someone who's learning to be confident. You operate like someone who is confident. This might feel uncomfortable at first because there's a gap between your current reality and your desired identity. But that discomfort is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're growing. It's evidence that you're expanding beyond your current limitations. The marketing manager who starts acting like someone who's already successful might feel like they're being inauthentic initially. But they're not being inauthentic. They're being who they're becoming. They're acting from their potential rather than their past. They're choosing to embody their desired identity rather than being trapped by their current one. And here's what happens when you consistently act from your desired identity. Your brain starts looking for evidence that supports this new identity. It begins noticing your successes more than your failures. It starts interpreting challenges as opportunities for growth rather than threats to avoid. It begins generating thoughts and feelings that are consistent with your new identity. This is the opposite of what happens when you act from a limiting identity. When you identify as someone who's not good at something, your brain looks for evidence that confirms this belief. It notices your mistakes more than your successes. It interprets challenges as proof of your limitations. It generates thoughts and feelings that reinforce your negative self-concept. But when you act from an empowering identity, your brain becomes your ally in creating the life you want. It starts working to maintain consistency with your positive self-concept. It looks for opportunities to reinforce your new identity. It generates motivation and confidence that support your continued growth. The software engineer who starts identifying as someone who's a natural leader begins noticing moments when they successfully influence others. They start interpreting team challenges as opportunities to develop their leadership skills. They begin generating ideas for how to better support their colleagues. Their brain starts working to make their leadership identity a reality. The parent who starts identifying as someone who's patient and understanding begins noticing moments when they handle difficult situations calmly. They start interpreting their children's behavior through a lens of curiosity rather than frustration. They begin generating more creative solutions to family challenges. Their brain starts supporting behaviors that match their desired identity as a patient parent. This is identity-level change, and it's the most powerful form of transformation because it's self-reinforcing. The more you act from your desired identity, the more evidence you create that supports that identity. The more evidence you have, the more natural it becomes to act from that identity. The more natural it becomes, the more consistent your actions become. The more consistent your actions become, the more dramatic your results become. But here's the crucial insight that most people miss. You don't have to wait until you achieve your goals to start acting from your desired identity. You can start today. You can start right now. You can make the next decision from the identity of the person you want to become, rather than the identity of the person you've been. The choice is always available to you. In every moment, you can choose to act from your past or your potential. You can choose to reinforce your current limitations or build evidence for your desired capabilities. You can choose to remain trapped by your old story or start writing a new one. The person in the mirror tomorrow morning doesn't have to be the same person you see today. They can be someone who's one day closer to their goals, someone who's building evidence for a new identity, someone who's actively becoming the person they want to be. But it starts with a choice. The choice to stop acting like who you've been and start acting like who you want to become. The choice to vote for your desired identity with every action you take. The choice to write a new story about who you are and what you're capable of. The mirror will reflect back whoever you choose to be. The question is, who will you choose? Chapter 6, the discipline system that guarantees success. The alarm goes off at 5 a.m. For most people, this is where the battle begins and ends. They hit snooze, negotiate with themselves, make excuses, and wonder why they can't seem to stick to their goals. But a small percentage of people get up immediately, not because they feel like it, but because they've built something more powerful than motivation. They've built a system. An operations manager sits up in bed before the second beep of their alarm. 6 months ago, they were hitting snooze 3 times every morning, rushing to work, feeling behind before the day even started. Today, they move with quiet confidence through a morning routine that has transformed not just their productivity, but their entire sense of self. What changed? They stopped relying on discipline as a feeling and started treating it as a system. Here's the brutal truth that most people never learn. Discipline is not a character trait you're born with or without. It's not about having more willpower than other people. It's not about being naturally motivated or inherently strong. Discipline is a system, and like any system, it can be designed, built, and optimized for guaranteed results. Think about the most successful people you know, the ones who consistently exercise, eat well, advance in their careers, maintain strong relationships, and seem to have their lives together. You might think they're just naturally disciplined, that they wake up every day feeling motivated to do the right thing. But if you look closer, you'll discover something different. They don't rely on feeling disciplined. They've created systems that make disciplined behavior automatic. The difference between people who succeed and people who struggle isn't willpower, it's systems. The person who exercises consistently doesn't have more motivation than you. They've created a system that makes exercise easier than not exercising. The person who eats healthily doesn't have more self-control than you. They've created a system that makes healthy choices the default choices. The person who advances in their career doesn't work harder than you. They've created a system that ensures their efforts compound over time. But here's where most people go wrong when they try to build discipline. They focus on the wrong things. They try to build willpower instead of building systems. They try to increase motivation instead of decreasing friction. They try to force themselves to do hard things instead of making hard things easier. This approach is exhausting, unsustainable, and destined to fail. Because willpower is a finite resource. Motivation comes and goes. But systems work regardless of how you feel. Let me show you how the operations manager built their morning system. 6 months ago, their alarm would go off at 7 a.m. They would hit snooze until 7:30, rush through a shower, grab coffee and a pastry on the way to work, and arrive feeling stressed and reactive. This wasn't a system. This was chaos disguised as a routine. But they didn't try to fix this by forcing themselves to feel more motivated. They didn't rely on willpower to suddenly become a morning person. Instead, they designed a system that made the right choices inevitable. First, they identified the friction points. What was making it hard to get up early? They were going to bed too late, their phone was next to their bed creating distractions, their workout clothes weren't ready, they didn't have a compelling reason to get up early, and their environment wasn't supporting their goals. Then they systematically removed each friction point. They set a bedtime alarm that reminded them to start winding down at 9 p.m. They moved their phone to the bathroom so they had to get out of bed to turn off the alarm. They laid out their workout clothes the night before. They scheduled an early morning workout class that they would lose money if they missed. They gradually shifted their bedtime earlier by 15 minutes each week until they were naturally tired by 9:30 p.m. But most importantly, they didn't try to change everything at once. They built their system one piece at a time, allowing each habit to become automatic before adding the next one. This is the difference between sustainable change and temporary motivation. Systems are built gradually, tested, refined, and optimized over time. Here's the framework that turns any goal into an automatic system. Step 1. Identify your keystone habit. Every successful discipline system is built around one keystone habit. This is the single behavior that, when done consistently, creates a cascade of positive changes in other areas of your life. For the operations manager, it was waking up at 5 a.m. This one habit gave them time for exercise, healthy breakfast, planning their day, and arriving at work with energy and focus. Your keystone habit should be something that naturally leads to other positive behaviors. If you want to get in shape, your keystone habit might be putting on your workout clothes immediately after waking up. If you want to build a business, it might be working on your project for 1 hour before checking email. If you want to improve your relationships, it might be putting your phone away during dinner. The key is to choose one habit that acts as a domino, knocking over other positive behaviors automatically. Step 2. Make it ridiculously easy. Most people fail at building discipline because they try to make massive changes immediately. They decide to work out for 2 hours, eat perfectly, wake up at 5 a.m., meditate for 30 minutes, and read for an hour, all starting tomorrow. This approach is guaranteed to fail because it requires too much willpower and creates too much friction. Instead, make your keystone habit so easy that it's harder to not do it than to do it. If you want to start exercising, don't commit to an hour-long workout. Commit to putting on your workout clothes. If you want to start reading, don't commit to reading for an hour. Commit to reading 1 page. If you want to start meditating, don't commit to 20 minutes. Commit to taking 3 deep breaths. This might seem insignificant, but you're not trying to achieve your ultimate goal on day 1. You're trying to build the neural pathway that will eventually make the full behavior automatic. Once putting on workout clothes becomes effortless, extending it to a full workout becomes natural. Once reading 1 page becomes automatic, reading for longer periods becomes easy. Step 3. Design your environment. Your environment is stronger than your willpower. If you have to rely on self-control to make good choices, you've already lost. The most disciplined people don't have more willpower than you. They've designed their environment to make good choices easier and bad choices harder. The person who eats healthily doesn't keep junk food in their house. The person who exercises consistently keeps their workout clothes visible and their running shoes by the door. The person who reads regularly keeps books on their nightstand and removes the TV from their bedroom. The person who saves money automatically transfers funds to savings before they can spend them. Look at your environment through the lens of friction. What is making your desired behavior harder? What is making your undesired behavior easier? Then systematically remove friction from good choices and add friction to bad choices. Step 4. Create accountability systems. Accountability is not about having someone check up on you. It's about creating systems that make it costly to break your commitments to yourself. The operations manager didn't just decide to wake up early. They scheduled expensive morning workout classes that they would lose money if they missed. They told their spouse about their new routine and asked for support. They tracked their wake-up time on a calendar that was visible to others. But the most powerful accountability system is identity-based. When you start seeing yourself as the kind of person who keeps their commitments, breaking those commitments becomes inconsistent with your self-image. This is why the identity work from the previous chapter is so crucial. When your discipline system aligns with your identity, it becomes self-reinforcing. Step 5. Plan for obstacles. Every discipline system will face obstacles. The question isn't whether you'll encounter challenges, but how you'll respond when you do. Most people don't plan for obstacles, so when they inevitably arise, they use them as excuses to abandon their system entirely. But successful people plan for obstacles in advance. They create if-then plans that specify exactly what they'll do when specific challenges arise. If I'm traveling for work, then I'll do a 15-minute bodyweight workout in my hotel room. If I'm feeling sick, then I'll maintain my morning routine but skip the workout and do gentle stretching instead. If I have an early meeting, then I'll wake up 30 minutes earlier to maintain my routine. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being resilient. It's about having a plan that can bend without breaking, that can adapt to circumstances while maintaining its core structure. Step 6. Track leading indicators, not just results. Most people track the wrong things. They focus on outcomes like weight loss, income, or test scores. But outcomes are lagging indicators. They tell you what happened in the past, not what's happening right now. By the time you see changes in outcomes, you've already been succeeding or failing for weeks or months. Instead, track leading indicators. These are the behaviors that predict future success. If your goal is weight loss, don't just track your weight. Track how many days you exercised, how many healthy meals you ate, how many hours you slept. If your goal is career advancement, don't just track promotions. Track how many skills you developed, how many networking conversations you had, how many projects you completed ahead of schedule. Leading indicators give you real-time feedback on whether your system is working. They allow you to make adjustments before small problems become big failures. But here's the most important part of any discipline system. It must be sustainable. A system that works for a week or a month but then collapses is not a system. It's a temporary burst of motivation disguised as discipline. Sustainable systems are built on consistency, not intensity. They're designed to work when you're tired, stressed, busy, or unmotivated. They're flexible enough to adapt to changing circumstances, but structured enough to maintain momentum. The operations manager system has now been running for 6 months. Some days are easier than others. Some days, they feel energized and motivated. Other days, they feel tired and resistant. But the system works regardless of how they feel, because it's not dependent on their emotional state. They wake up at 5 a.m., not because they feel like it, but because their environment makes it easier to wake up than to stay in bed. They exercise not because they're motivated, but because their system makes it the natural next step. They eat healthily not because they have perfect self-control, but because their meal prep system makes healthy choices the default choices. This is what discipline really looks like. It's not about being perfect or having superhuman willpower. It's about creating systems that make success inevitable and failure nearly impossible. But here's the final insight that ties everything together. Building a discipline system is itself an act of discipline. It requires you to think beyond immediate gratification and design for long-term success. It requires you to invest time and energy up front to create systems that will serve you for years to come. Most people aren't willing to do this work. They want the results of discipline without the investment required to build disciplined systems. They want to feel motivated instead of creating conditions that make motivation irrelevant. They want to rely on willpower instead of building systems that make willpower unnecessary. But you're different. You understand that discipline is not about forcing yourself to do hard things. It's about making hard things easier through intelligent design. You understand that the goal isn't to develop more willpower. It's to create systems that require less willpower. The choice is clear. You can continue to rely on motivation, willpower, and feelings to drive your behavior. You can keep starting and stopping, trying and failing, hoping that somehow this time will be different. Or you can invest the time and energy to build systems that guarantee your success, regardless of how you feel. The operations manager made their choice 6 months ago. Their life is fundamentally different now, not because they became a different person, but because they built systems that support the person they wanted to become. Your systems are waiting to be built. Your discipline is waiting to be systematized. Your success is waiting to be automated. The only question is, when will you start building?